There comes a defining moment in every profound human connection when the unconscious mind can no longer conceal what it truly feels. What you're sensing right now is not simply imagination or hopeful thinking. It's the quiet emotional shift taking place within someone whose inner world has been deeply touched by your presence. In the silent corners of their mind, where hidden emotions often remain unnoticed, they're standing at a life-altering crossroads. No matter which direction they consider, every path somehow seems to lead back to you. For a long time, they've tried to distract themselves, rationalize the intensity of their emotions, and convince themselves that distance, silence, or time would eventually weaken the bond you shared. But the human psyche rarely works that way. The more they've attempted to suppress their connection with you, the stronger it has quietly become. Something deep within them keeps drawing them back, refusing to let them escape the truth of what exists between you. That's because what you shared was never shallow or temporary. It reached the deepest layers of their being, touching places that cannot simply disappear or be forgotten. Right now, they're questioning nearly everything they once believed. They're not only rethinking your place in their life, but also examining who they truly are. Old fears, emotional wounds, and the protective walls they've carried for years are beginning to rise to the surface, demanding to be recognized. The decision they're wrestling with isn't merely whether to stay or walk away. It's whether they're finally willing to face their authentic self. For many people, that can feel even more intimidating than falling in love. One part of them longs for you with remarkable intensity. Your absence feels like a missing piece of their own life. Yet another part resists just as strongly, because being with you would require openness, honesty, and personal growth on a level that feels overwhelming. As we've often explored here at Psychonym, genuine transformation is rarely comfortable. It's one of the most difficult experiences a person can endure, yet it's also one of the most necessary. If you've noticed the energy between you becoming heavier or more emotionally intense, it's because they're no longer running from the truth. They're finally allowing themselves to sit with it. Now they're asking difficult questions they can no longer ignore. Why do you still occupy so much of their thoughts? Why does your presence continue to echo through their emotions? Why has no one else been able to replace what they experienced with you? This is the final stage before real clarity begins to emerge. The mind cannot remain divided forever. Eventually, it has to choose what is true. When that decision is made, you'll see who they genuinely are, not the version shaped by fear, pride, or outside expectations, but the version that reflects their deepest truth. If they return, it won't be because it's easy or familiar. It will be because they've finally realized how rare and meaningful your connection truly was. And if they choose to walk away, it won't mean you weren't enough. It will simply mean they weren't ready for the profound inner transformation that loving you required. For now, your role isn't to chase them, pressure them, or try to control the outcome. Allow everything to unfold naturally. The mind heals and awakens according to its own timing. Whatever decision eventually emerges will come from truth rather than illusion. At this very moment, they're carrying the weight of a choice that could completely reshape their future. Beneath the surface, an intense psychological struggle is unfolding. This isn't ordinary uncertainty. It's a deep conflict between two powerful sides of themselves. One side feels irresistibly drawn toward you, guided by memories, longing, and an unexplainable sense of belonging that logic alone cannot fully explain. The other side is driven by fear, old emotional wounds, and the instinct to protect itself at any cost. That inner voice urges them to remain guarded and avoid the vulnerability that genuine intimacy demands. These opposing forces are colliding with tremendous intensity, creating pressure that cannot continue forever. They may immerse themselves in work, routines, or constant distractions, hoping to convince themselves that these feelings will eventually disappear. But the truth refuses to fade away. Every attempt to suppress it only allows it to return with even greater strength, because the real battle is taking place entirely within them. Without fully realizing it, you've become the catalyst for this inner transformation. Your presence has challenged the emotional defenses they've depended on for years and has forced them to question the identity they created to feel safe. They're now standing before a life-changing decision: remain the person they've always been or step into an unfamiliar version of themselves that requires courage, vulnerability, and emotional risk. This internal conflict is exhausting. It's why you've likely experienced inconsistency, the moments when they seem ready to move closer, followed by times when they suddenly pull away. This isn't necessarily manipulation. It's the natural result of someone trying to reconcile two truths that seem impossible to hold at the same time. They deeply desire the connection, yet they're frightened by what embracing it could ask of them. As this struggle continues, the remaining illusions slowly begin to disappear. They can no longer convince themselves that you're simply another passing chapter in their story. They're being forced to see both you and themselves with a level of honesty that feels deeply unsettling. Every memory, every conversation, and every shared emotion returns with greater clarity and emotional depth. This challenging process is often what comes before a truly life-changing decision. The very fact that they're still caught within this inner struggle is meaningful in itself. People don't wrestle this deeply with something that holds no meaning for them. Sooner or later, the emotional haze begins to lift. And when it does, the truth they've been trying so hard to avoid becomes impossible to overlook. The transformation taking place isn't because the circumstances around them have suddenly changed. It's happening because the human mind can only carry uncertainty for so long before it finally reaches its limit. They are stepping into a season of clarity now, as though sunlight is finally breaking through clouds that have covered the sky for far too long. For a long time, they convinced themselves that what they felt for you was temporary, manageable, or perhaps not as significant as it first appeared. But emotions never remain frozen. They grow, deepen, and gradually become impossible to deny. They are now arriving at a quiet yet undeniable realization. Their feelings for you are no longer just emotions they experience. They have become woven into the very fabric of who they are. This realization doesn't arrive all at once. Instead, it appears unexpectedly late at night when everything around them is silent. It emerges during ordinary moments when their thoughts suddenly drift toward memories they once tried so hard to bury, but that now return with surprising strength. Little by little, they're beginning to recognize a pattern. No matter how much time passes or how many distractions they chase, their thoughts always find their way back to you. Your presence continues to exist in the background of their life, like a constant signal that never completely disappears. Nothing else has truly managed to fill the space you left behind. Ironically, your absence has become one of the greatest driving forces in this entire process. By stepping away, you created a space they could no longer escape. Without your immediate presence and without outside distractions drowning out their emotions, they were left alone with their own thoughts, a place they had avoided for a very long time. In that silence, they slowly began to understand what was truly missing. Distance stripped away the comforts and assumptions they once depended upon and revealed the deeper truth beneath the surface. They're beginning to realize that what they experienced with you wasn't merely enjoyable or convenient. It offered something far more meaningful, something that supported them emotionally in ways they may never have fully appreciated at the time. During quiet moments, they catch themselves comparing new experiences with what they once shared with you, not because they deliberately choose to, but because the comparison happens naturally. Time after time, they discover that the connection they experienced with you is incredibly difficult to find anywhere else. This realization continues, strengthening their growing certainty. They're beginning to understand that you were never simply another passing chapter. You became a rare and meaningful part of their journey, someone who changed them far more deeply than they ever expected. All of this is transforming them from within. Whether they fully recognize it yet or not, they are moving toward a decision that can no longer be delayed. They're beginning to understand that the road ahead demands a choice. They can remain trapped inside familiar patterns and emotional comfort zones, or they can move forward into the growth and transformation this connection has awakened inside them. Beneath the surface, an incredibly powerful struggle continues. Most people around them would never recognize it, yet it quietly influences nearly everything they think, feel, and do. Fear and desire are no longer operating independently. They've collided directly, creating an emotional tension that keeps pulling them in opposite directions. One part of them feels an undeniable pull toward you. This reaches far beyond simple chemistry or temporary fascination. Being connected to you feels natural, almost as though it brings them closer to the person they were always meant to become. There is a sense of comfort, understanding, acceptance, and emotional depth they find almost impossible to explain. It's the part of them that longs to stop resisting, close the distance between you, and completely embrace what feels real and authentic. But another part of them remains deeply guarded. This fear isn't necessarily about you. It's about everything loving you represents. It awakens memories of past disappointments, old emotional wounds, broken trust, and painful moments when vulnerability led to heartbreak. Some of these fears may not even exist within their conscious awareness, yet they continue influencing their decisions and reactions. Whenever they begin moving closer emotionally, those protective instincts become louder. They urge caution, they encourage retreat, they remind them of every possible risk involved in opening their heart completely. They push them to build even stronger emotional walls and maintain a sense of control. This creates the exhausting push-and-pull dynamic you've probably noticed. One day, they seem ready to embrace their feelings completely and imagine everything that could be possible between the two of you. The next day, fear rises once again, bringing hesitation and causing them to pull away. What makes this conflict so incredibly difficult is that both sides feel equally genuine. Their heart tells them one story while their protective instincts tell them another. Neither voice can simply be ignored. They're trying to navigate two deeply powerful emotional truths at the very same time. That's exactly why their behavior may appear inconsistent or confusing. The real issue isn't uncertainty about what they feel for you. The deeper challenge is learning how to handle everything those feelings awaken within them. As this inner struggle continues, the defenses they've depended upon for so many years are slowly beginning to weaken. Remaining suspended between these two opposing forces is becoming impossible. Eventually, something has to change. They will either allow fear to keep them standing at a distance, or they will finally choose to move toward what their heart has quietly been trying to tell them all along. The longer this battle continues, the more difficult it becomes to ignore what is happening inside them. Every attempt to suppress these emotions only seems to make them return with greater intensity. What they once believed would eventually disappear has instead become stronger with time. Rather than fading away, their feelings have continued to mature beneath the surface, quietly shaping the way they see themselves, the way they view their future, and the way they think about you. They're beginning to recognize that some connections aren't easily replaced. Certain people leave an imprint that remains long after the conversations end and the physical distance grows. You became one of those rare people. Even when life kept moving forward, a part of them remained emotionally connected to everything you represented. Now they're beginning to understand that running from these emotions has never truly brought them peace. It only delayed the moment they would eventually have to face the truth. Every distraction eventually loses its power. Every attempt to convince themselves otherwise slowly falls apart. What remains is the quiet realization that their heart has known the answer much longer than their mind was willing to admit. That understanding is becoming more difficult to silence with each passing day. The emotional walls that once felt permanent are beginning to crack. The certainty they once placed in fear is slowly being replaced by curiosity, hope, and a growing desire to experience something real rather than simply protect themselves from being hurt again. They may still hesitate from time to time. They may still question themselves. Old habits rarely disappear overnight. But beneath every hesitation is a growing awareness that continuing to live without acknowledging what they truly feel will eventually become more painful than taking the risk of opening their heart. And that realization changes everything. Because once someone reaches that point, they no longer see love as something to escape. They begin seeing it as something worth protecting, nurturing, and choosing despite the uncertainty. That's the quiet transformation taking place within them now. It's slow, deeply personal, and invisible to almost everyone around them, but it is real. Every passing day moves them one step closer to accepting what they have been resisting for so long. Sooner or later, they will have to decide whether fear deserves to shape the rest of their life, or whether they are finally ready to trust what their heart has been revealing all along. That decision is drawing closer than ever before, and deep inside, they already know which path truly leads to peace. And this decision reaches far beyond a relationship. It's gradually becoming a choice about the kind of person they want to become moving forward. The pressure continues building toward a moment they can no longer avoid. A major turning point is approaching, whether they feel ready for it or not. For such a long time, they've remained trapped in cycles of hesitation, examining every possibility, revisiting every detail, and trying to maintain control over emotions that continue growing stronger. But the mind cannot remain uncertain forever. When emotions become this profound and thoughts return this consistently, some form of resolution becomes necessary. That's exactly where they are now, standing on the edge of a decision that will shape the direction of their future. This isn't something reckless or sudden. It's the outcome of everything they've been processing internally for a very long time. The longing, the uncertainty, the reflection, and the emotional weight they've carried have all been leading them toward this exact moment. As we often discuss here at Psychonym, clarity rarely appears out of nowhere. It develops after a long period of questioning, resisting, and searching. Whether they consciously realize it or not, they're moving closer to that clarity. The signs are already becoming visible. They repeatedly return to old memories. They imagine different possibilities for the future. They replay conversations and shared experiences, searching for deeper understanding. None of this is happening by chance. It's preparing them for a meaningful shift in perspective. As this important moment draws nearer, you may notice them becoming more restless, distracted, or even emotionally distant. Don't immediately interpret that as a loss of interest. More often, it's a sign they're carrying something emotionally significant and trying to understand it before taking the next step. The decision they're approaching is about far more than choosing a relationship. It's about bringing their outer life into alignment with a truth they can no longer deny within themselves. They're beginning to realize that remaining caught between holding on and letting go is emotionally exhausting. Living in that in-between space has drained them, keeping them trapped in the same cycle instead of moving forward. Now they're being called to take full responsibility for what they genuinely want. That level of honesty leaves no room for excuses or avoidance. This crossroads isn't only testing their feelings for you, it's challenging the way they view themselves. They have to ask whether they're willing to leave the comfort of emotional safety behind for a connection that invites them to become a stronger, more authentic version of themselves. Something deep inside them recognizes that this isn't just another passing chapter. It feels like a defining moment. The uncertainty that once protected them is beginning to feel more like a burden than a shield. They're realizing that avoiding a decision never truly protected them. It only kept them standing still. Because of that awareness, they're moving closer to making a sincere choice, not because anyone is forcing them, but because their own heart refuses to remain silent any longer. What they're experiencing now is a deeply transformative process that will eventually reveal their true emotions with complete honesty. For a long time, they became skilled at hiding what they felt, even from themselves. They relied on distance, logic, and emotional restraint to keep everything contained. But feelings rooted this deeply cannot remain buried forever. They've reached the point where everything they've tried to suppress is rising to the surface with undeniable clarity. Whatever decision they ultimately make won't come from impulse or temporary emotion. It will emerge from profound self-awareness. When someone spends enough time alone with their thoughts, the truth eventually becomes impossible to escape. They're beginning to recognize the difference between what they've always felt and how they've behaved. They remember the moments they remained silent when they desperately wanted to speak. They remember pulling away when every part of them wanted to move closer. Recognizing that contradiction is painful, but it's also necessary. It's the bridge between fear and action. They're finally understanding that avoidance never solved anything. It only delayed the moment they would have to face their own heart. This clarity isn't being created by outside influence. It's growing from within, carrying a sense of authenticity they can no longer ignore. The words, "I don't know," no longer sound convincing, even to themselves. Your connection has become too present in their inner world to dismiss. It appears during quiet moments, unexpected memories, and private reflections, asking to be acknowledged again and again. Because of this, whatever choice they eventually make will reflect who they truly are, rather than the protective version of themselves they've hidden behind for so long. The emotional transformation taking place inside them has reached a point where years of suppressed feelings can no longer remain hidden away. The old emotional structures they've depended upon simply aren't strong enough to contain everything that's rising to the surface. As we often discuss here at Psychonym, every person has a limit to how much inner conflict they can carry before something has to change. That release rarely happens all at once. Instead, it begins through small, almost invisible shifts in the way they understand themselves and their experiences. They're beginning to look back over the story of your connection from a completely different perspective. Instead of seeing scattered moments or isolated memories, they're recognizing a meaningful pattern. They see how this connection quietly reshaped their inner world and influenced the person they've become. That realization is slowly dismantling the final pieces of denial. They're beginning to understand that what they miss isn't only you. They also miss the version of themselves that existed when they were with you. Around you, they felt more alive, more authentic, and more emotionally connected. Comparing that earlier version of themselves with the guarded life they've been living ever since creates a contrast that's becoming harder and harder to overlook. Ironically, this growing discomfort is bringing the very clarity they've been searching for all along. They're beginning to realize that the safety they worked so hard to preserve has slowly become a form of emotional confinement. Instead of truly protecting them, it has kept them from evolving into the person they're fully capable of becoming. As this awareness continues to grow, outside distractions gradually lose much of their influence. They may bury themselves in work, spend more time with friends, or immerse themselves in new hobbies and interests. Yet beneath all of those activities, the same quiet current remains. Their thoughts continue finding their way back to you. This is the stage where the ego slowly begins surrendering its struggle against the heart. The ego naturally looks for safety by holding on to control and maintaining emotional distance. But something far deeper now understands that living disconnected from what truly matters creates an even greater form of suffering over time. They're weighing two very different futures. One offers familiarity along with the illusion of security. The other brings uncertainty, yet also carries the possibility of something deeply meaningful. For the first time, that possibility is starting to feel more valuable than the comfort they've been desperately protecting.